So I'm going to today talk a little bit about a thing called Incident Command System. It's a system that I'll go into a bit farther in the presentation that is used by pretty much all governmental systems when they deal with disaster response. So it's pretty involved, but hopefully I won't scare anyone today when we start getting into it, and so they have a rough idea of when you hear emergency responders talking in this kind of unique language, so at least have a knowledge of the basics that they're talking in. So I'm going to start by talking a bit about what exactly is Incident Command Systems. Basically, ICS is a standardized management tool for meeting the demands of small or large emergency or non-emergency situations. It represents best practices and has become the standard for emergency management across the country. This entire system, which again is used by FEMA, it's used by state, local agencies, pretty much came out of 9/11 and Hurricane Katrina. What happened was as emergency responders were coming across the country or across the regional area, what was used by them for their different codes or languages wasn't used by other groups. So for example, if a police force said, okay, 1040, we got it, we'll bring water to your location, the fire department will sit there and think, 1040, that means they need eggs in a basket? Like basically the language didn't really make sense between communications. So with that, the government kind of decided to start coming up with a national system so that people would be able to understand each other. Now, there's lots of benefits to the ICS program. As I said, it's standardized. Basically, everyone, responders, staff at locations, learn to operate within the same structure, one that will take over for all others, and everyone will be speaking, again, the same language. It's scalable, which is huge. It can be applied to large incidents and small incidents. So you'll see it applied to hurricane situations, but also, going to get a little closer, let's see if that's a little better. It can be applied to hurricanes or also just local sporting events. It can be used on the scene. This is a key point with ICS. Oftentimes with emergency response, people would have command stations set up in some random location far away from the accident itself. With ICS, it's set to actually happen at the location. And it's also multi-jurisdictional. When the ICS structure and when the ICS system happens, it takes place across a university system across the city. So it basically can handle itself across the system itself. It has been found to be incredibly cost-effective. It basically will stop duplication of effort. So if one person is getting water, once the ICS command structure is put into effect, there will only be one person getting water. There won't be 50 people getting water. It can be applicable to all different types of hazards, and it can be implemented in response or in advance. So oftentimes you might see it happen for a hurricane situation, or it can happen for something that's going to be happening in the future. So I've kind of babbled on now about the benefits of ICS. I also want to talk a little bit about what this presentation is. With ICS, it is a very involved system. So this is not going to be a formalized training in ICS. We don't have time to do that here. ICS training can take anywhere from an hour, hour and a half online training to multi-day courses, of which I have taken and go very good or very intensive. So we're not going to be doing that today. I'm basically going to be getting sources for free training and giving everyone a good familiarization in the terminology used. So again, what you're going to hear is an overview of terms and a goal to give everyone a taste of what this nationally used system is. To keep going, you might ask yourself, why do we need to know this? Oftentimes when we operate within a disaster response, and kind of Linda went into this a little bit too, you feel like you're going to be a little isolated. You're going to feel like you're working on it, but we're all part of communities, and we're all going to be either answering or getting supplies from governmental systems. With that, the governmental systems are going to be using this system. You're going to hear them talk about it, you're going to hear them talking through this command structure, so it's really good to be able to speak their language whenever they're having a disaster. Another huge benefit of this system is that it's actually been proven to be used on a localized system. So once you start learning about this system, you start looking around your organization, you might find yourself being able to use the ICS structure when you're planning for a visit by a VIP, when you're planning for a special event at your location. This system will actually work for you. So, again, we're going to go back. What the heck is it? You've not heard me talk about a lot of fun terms. You've not heard me talk about a lot of different things. Basically, ICS is a command structure that is used to respond to an incident. What's an incident? An incident, in our case, is a disaster. An incident can be a special event, an incident can be a tour, anything along that line. This crazy chart is the ICS command structure. It looks like an organizational chart, as you can see. It can be a little overwhelming, so what I'm going to start doing now is breaking it down a little bit to try to give a little bit more sense of just what it is. With ICS, it looks complicated, but you're going to start recognizing it in different areas that we maybe have read through this session. The Getty Guide actually uses a good chunk of ICS structuring, if you really think about it. So it'll become more familiar as we go along. But, you know, let's start at the top, because that's obviously a good place to start. And hold on, I'm reading a quick message. So let me click off real quick and see if we want to hold off before Manatee Village comes in.
Great, and this is Adam from Learning Times. Miriam, just let me know if you'd like us to hold to troubleshoot with one of the sites. I don't know if we just lost one or if we're good to go on.
Adam, thanks for jumping in. I have a sneaking suspicion that Manatee Historic Village is just not here and not hearing any of this. Can somebody from Manatee Historic Village pop in and let us know if you're hearing us?
Yes, we're online, Marion. We're okay.
Super. Thank you so much. Okay, I'm going to turn the microphone back over to Robin. Robin, I'm hearing that if you can talk a little bit more slowly and closer to the mic, that might be helpful to people. Sorry to do that to you as you're talking. Thanks, Robin. Back to you.
Oh, no problem. It's my Northeastern upbringing coming up. I start to talk really fast. So I'll try to slow down a little bit. I apologize for that. And I'll try to talk a bit louder. Like I was saying before, this is the basic ICS structure. And I'm going to start up at the top with the top level, which is the incident commander. Essentially, the incident commander is the person who provides overall leadership of the response. It's usually the first person to respond to an incident who has knowledge of the facility and will be the only person in charge until an official transfer of command. The thing with the incident commander is that they are going to be the first person on site who has knowledge of the situation. So this could be the museum director, let's say if they're the first person on site. It could be an operations person if they're the first person on site. It's literally the first person there. And the reason why this is because they're going to be there to assess the situation and take control of what is happening. Now there's two major points to being an incident commander. One is the concept of chain of command, which is that every person takes orders only from their supervisor, and then a concept called unity of command, which is every person has only one supervisor. This might seem like a simple thing, but oftentimes when we get into emergency situations, there might be multiple people trying to take control, and there might be multiple people giving you direction, and that's something you don't want. So, you know, going back to the structure, if you look at it, there's really only one person in charge of each area. There's the incident commander, who's all the way up there at the top. Let's see if I can get a pointer going. There we go. There's the incident commander, who's all the way up here at the top. There's going to be some other folks, but they all lead up to that exact same person, only one person in charge. Now, with this concept, you don't want to stop communication. ICS is really dependent upon the idea of people being able to talk to each other, people being able to flow back and forth with communication. But even with that idea, you only take commands from one person. The next level of ICS is a group called command staff. They basically act as direct support to the commander. So the positions help incident commander with the big picture issues. An important concept also with ICS is, you know, there was that crazy flow chart with all those different positions. Not necessarily all of them need to be filled at an incident. With IPS, as long as there's someone fulfilling the role that's kind of outlined within the officer position, you're fine. So let's say, we get on scene and you need someone to act as a public information officer. If you don't have someone and the incident commander can act as a public information officer, you don't need to fill it. It's okay, because that role is being fulfilled by the higher ranking person. To get into slightly more definitions of what each of these people do, you do have your information officer. They basically act as the primary contact for all information concerning the incident. They're going to be the person talking to the outside media, talking to everyone. Again, one person talking, not multiple people talking about an incident that might be happening. You have the safety officer that looks after safety of all involved in the incident. You have a liaison officer who acts as a go-between for the incident commander. They act like the buffer. Basically, if you're operating within an incident and the president, let's say you work for a university museum, and the president comes by and says, we need a VIP tour of the hazard, go! The incident commander is not going to be the person doing that. Theoretically, the liaison officer is going to come in and do those arrangements for you. Next up in that fabulous chart on the previous page is the level called section level. Now these are going to be the actual operational levels within the IPX structure. They have primary responsibility of the incident management, and it's broken up into 4 main areas: an operations section, a planning section, a logistics section, and a finance and admin. All of these folks who are in charge of these areas are known as chiefs. That's just the terminology that ICS uses. To get into a little bit more specifics, the operations section is usually the first section staffed during an incident. They direct all strategic and tactical actions required to meet the incident. This is the group that's really going to be doing most of the incident response. They're going to be the ones physically out there doing the things. Next, we have the planning section. That section is created to understand the situation as it stands at any moment. They predict the probable course of incident and prepare alternative strategies. They basically play a giant game of what if. So if you're dealing with a hurricane situation and the hurricane slows down, which we have all experienced, they'll sit there and start coming up with various scenarios to deal with the situation. If you've ordered ice and the ice hasn't shown up yet, they're the ones who sat there and thought about that and figured out alternative areas to get the ice. So they're kind of there just kind of looking for future action. The logistics section is often used in much larger incidents. Sometimes it's used by the it's kind of taken over by the operations system, but they effectively act like a supply chain. They are used in larger incidents and are responsible for getting communications to the staff, getting medical support, food, supplies, facilities, and ground support. They're there making sure the staff is happy, being fed, getting treated if there's accidents, all that kind of aspect. And then lastly, we have our finance and administration section. We were talking a little bit in our group before about FEMA paperwork, which if anyone has dealt with FEMA loves paperwork. So they're going to be the ones really dealing with making sure all the proper forms are being filled out, making sure that staff is keeping their timekeeping, making sure procurement of different items, making sure people are being paid, and also, most importantly, looking at cost analysis and making sure that people are being charged properly. Now, I'll let you guys know that when it comes to the Getty Guide, and they talk about that documentation group, which is the textbook we're all using for this project, this is a lot like the finance and administration section. They're the ones recording everything. So again, you kind of see echoes of the different emergency groups using the system, just changing the names ever so slightly. Okay, so now we have this sort of remaining crazy structure. We talked about the first 4 levels, the incident commander, the section or the liaison officers, and then the section chief. But now there's all this. So what is it? I'm going to run through the terms kind of quickly, but hopefully not so quick that people can understand me. So you guys, again, have a familiarization of what's happening. The first level you'll see underneath operations is called a branch. They're basically an organizational level having functional, geographical, or jurisdictional responsibility for major parts of the operations system. You'll really only see branch underneath operations, sometimes underneath logistics. Branches are often identified by the use of Roman numeral. With a division, you're responsible for operations within a geographic area. And then with group, you divide incident into functional areas of operation. So again, you're just breaking it more into layers. And this is just terminology that ICS uses. Our next group breaks down even farther. You can then go down into a unit, which is responsible for specific incident planning. A task force for resources with common communications. Strike teams, which, while sounding very exciting, is really just a combination of resources with a common leader. And then the last thing is really a single resource, which is a piece of equipment and a staff. So a single resource is used by all the other groups for help. So they can be a bulldozer, a guy with a truck. That's what a single resource is. And it just breaks it down to that lowest final layer. So as we're rounding this out, we have some major points to take away. I've thrown a lot of terms at everyone today, and I know it gets a little confusing. But just so you know, this system will be used by emergency responders. So it's a good idea to be familiar with it. The main point of ICS is that it provides common terms, symbols, and a language you can use with outside agencies of all different types. And most importantly, it can be scaled down to your situation. Again, kind of like what I brought up at the beginning. And as evidence of this, just to kind of prove that it can be used, this is an ICS structure that is used as an example to be used for libraries, archives, and museums. If we look at the top, we can see our incident commander, person who's in charge of everything. Here's all his support staff, the public information officer, the safety officer, his liaison. And underneath this organization, there's just one section. There's operations. Because if you guys remember, that's the section that basically deals with the response. There he is, just right underneath the incident commander. And now the operations chief has decided to break his group up into 4 teams. If you recall, teams are essentially people who have a single person to report to, and they have a group of resources they use. So in this situation, which is essentially a flood, he's broken it up into 4 teams. He has his vulnerable records team, he has his personnel, he has his network, and his facilities. Because as most of us know who've dealt with these kind of incidents, you want to get your records, your archival stuff out, you want to get your people out, you want to get your computers out, because goodness knows most of our information is kept on computers nowadays. And then with the facilities, you want to make sure that the facilities are taken care of. Now for further training in this information, FEMA actually offers all this training for free if you go online courses. Many classes are available. If you go to the FEMA website, which all you literally have to type in is FEMA ICS, and it loads up a crazy amount of things. There's a lot of different levels of it. The first 2 good ones to start with are IS 100B, which is just, again, the introduction to incident command systems. And then IS 700A, which is known as NIMS, an introduction. And NIMS is the National Incident Management System. So that's the overall structure all governmental agencies use when dealing with response, where ICS is a tool. So it's kind of good to get an idea of how ICS is utilized within the structure overall. And to kind of get translation of all these resources and services to a level that we kind of deal more with, there's an excellent website called rescuingrecords.com. It was designed by a gentleman by the name of David Carmichael, who wrote the book that's listed down below there. The book is called Implementing the Incident Command System at the Institutional Level, Handbook for Libraries, Archives, Museums, and Other Cultural Institutions. He was, or at least still is, the archivist of the state of Georgia. So he has a very good understanding of how ICS works and how we can use it at our levels for just all different types of institutions within the state. So it's incredibly useful to use. And that's it. So if anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to hear them.
We've got a question from Elise LeConte here in Jacksonville.
Hi, Robin. My question is, you talked about being responsible to your supervisor, only answering to or taking direction from your supervisor. So my question is, although the incident commander is the top supervisor, if I was on one of those teams that was laid out in the flow chart at the bottom, the head of that team would be my supervisor, correct?
Hi, Elise. Yes, that is absolutely correct. So obviously, incident commander is in charge of everything, but then as the teams are broken out, you will have a direct supervisor. So there'll be someone in charge of the operations section, the operations chief. You then, if let's say you're put on one of the branches, you would answer to the operations section chief. You would listen to them, and that's all you would listen to. So if all of a sudden the planning chief, let's say, would run over to you over on his side and try to give you a command, you could justifiably say, sorry, I belong to the operations section, the operations chief, go talk to them and make sure that they are okay with these plans and they want me to carry out these duties. That's that whole idea of chain of command and unity of command. You don't have to answer to two separate people.
Robin, there's another question, a follow-up question from Elise.
Oh, no, I just wanted to say thanks. I thought that was the answer, but I just wanted to clarify for myself and everyone else, too. Thank you.
And this is Miriam, and I have another clarification question, which is I often hear the terminology that the incident commander is the first person on the scene. Does that mean they are the first person on the scene because they literally were the first one who was able to get there from their house and they become incident commander, or because they have the key and they're the first one who can physically get into the building?
The incident commander is usually the first person on the scene. So even if, let's say you have a junior curator appears, maybe they can't get into the building, but the fire chief is on the outside talking to them, they're going to be the one in charge until the next higher person comes. So even if they can't physically get in the building, they're a member of staff, they kind of know what's happening, they're going to be the incident commander until another person comes along.
So Robin, that's really interesting, and I think that that's a really important point, which is that basically a very junior staff member might then have a period of time in which they're in charge of the director and would literally be telling the director what to do and could look at the director and say, no, you may not go into the building. Am I correct about that?
The idea is that the junior curator would be there in charge until the museum director would come along, and then they would have an official transfer of power. So usually what would happen, and thanks for bringing that up, usually what would happen is, let's say your junior curator's there, he's talking to the fire chief, your museum director comes up behind you and says, hey, I'm here. You say, great. The junior curator and museum director then have a little conference, and at that point, if the museum director should be the one in charge, the transfer of power would then go to them.
Thanks, Robin, for that clarification. I think that's a concept that for many of us is pretty foreign to the day-to-day way in which we work. And I think part of what this suggests is that we really have to develop some different relationships when there are disasters that are happening. So thanks for that clarification, and I'm going to look around the regions and ask if there are questions or comments from other regions.
We just had a really good question here in South Florida where Emily said that, what if a junior curator shows up and says, that's first person on the scene, and someone says, okay, you're the incident commander, and they basically say, no, I don't want to be the incident commander. They don't need to be in charge. This is a structural system that's set up to control an incident. They could just basically say, no, I don't want to do it and walk away. I'd be kind of afraid for the ramifications after the incident if they would just say no and walk away. But that also is a good point of why you need to cross-train your staff. Why it's incredibly important to make sure all staff understand that they may have a responsibility in the case of disaster training or disaster response. And even if you are the low man on the totem pole, there is a chance you might be in control for a while.
Larry, any questions from Manatee Village, or Linda, any questions in Pensacola?
Bradenton, nothing in Bradenton, thank you.